Hi, so in this video, we're going to be solving rational equations. And so the first thing I want to talk about is extraneous solutions. So an extraneous solution for a rational equation is anything that makes the denominator zero. So obviously we're not allowed to divide by zero, so if it makes the denominator zero, that's not a real solution. So we basically need to take that into account. So I like to do this first. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our denominators and see what would make the denominator zero. So in this case, that would be p equals 0, right? For all three of these denominators, p equals 0 would make the denominator 0. So I'm just going to write myself a note that p is not allowed to be 0. P is not equal to 0. Then at the end, when I get my answer, I'm going to check and make sure that none of my answers are 0, or that none of my answers match the note that I made myself at the beginning. And that will be how I check for extraneous solutions. So let's do this. Okay. So in general, when we're solving rational equations, we're going to look for we're going to find our common denominator first, and then we're going to multiply each fraction by that common denominator. So that will essentially get rid of denominators altogether, and then we can just solve from there. So let's look at that. So what would our common denominator be here? So we know it's going to have a 5 in it. It's going to have a p squared. And then, so p is already in the p squared's already in there. So that's it. Our common denominator is 5p squared. So I'm going to multiply each piece by 5p squared. Multiply the whole thing, each piece by 5p squared. So if I multiply this first one by 5p squared, then I'm going to have, then the denominators are just going to cancel, right? This 5p squared and this 5p squared are just going to cancel. So I'm going to have 6p minus 6, and that's it. Then if I multiply 5p squared by this fraction, then this p and one of these p's is going to cancel. So I'm going to have 2 times 5p. 2 times 5p is 10p. And then I'm going to multiply 5p squared by 1 over p squared. So the p squared and the p squared are going to cancel. So that's just 5 times 1. So I'm going to have minus 5 times 1 is 5. So the p squareds cancel. So see how going through and multiplying by the common denominator gets rid of all of my denominators. I have no more denominators. I don't have to worry about that anymore. Now I just have a regular linear equation that I can solve. So I'm going to subtract 10p from both sides. Let's subtract 6p from both sides so I don't have to deal with negatives. Subtract 6p from both sides. So I'm going to have 4p. And then I'm going to add 5 to both sides, so I have negative 1. And then I'm going to divide by 4, so I have p equals negative 1/4. Negative 1/4 is very much not 0, so this is not an extraneous solution. So this is my answer, and I'm done. All right, so hopefully that helps. Just figure out what your common denominator is, just like you've been doing, and then just multiply everything by that. And then you're good to go. Basically, it just becomes an equation that you already know how to solve. All right, see you in the next video.